Welcome to this webinar hosted by Lotus Clinical Research. My name is Eric Guitard and I am the Director of Clinical Development. Today, Dr. Singla will be talking to you about mitigation of placebo response in analgesic clinical trials. Dr. Singla is the founder and Chief Scientific Officer for Lotus Clinical Research. He currently chairs the Analgesic Clinical Trials Special Interest Group at APS and also IASP. His main focus has been to analyze and understand the inherent variability in analgesic clinical trials so that they can be minimized. Dr. Singla consults for multiple pharmaceutical companies regarding US-based regulatory analgesic issues. So at this stage, I will hand it over to you, Dr. Singla.
Thanks for that introduction. I'm excited to get started to discuss something that is on the mind of many analgesic researchers, which is methods to reduce placebo response. I want to start with a brief introduction to the problem. Analgesic studies are notoriously difficult to conduct, and they have low assay sensitivity in general for many reasons, one of which is high placebo response. Evidence of this is that most analgesics in development are reformulations, which means that we know the drugs work prior to starting our clinical trials, and yet we still see a large percentage of late-phase studies, which have had good phase 2 results where the PK has been confirmed, still fail. The question then is why, and here we present the triad of success in analgesic research to demonstrate the key concept, which is that an efficacious study drug is not all that you need to produce a positive study result. The protocol also has to be optimized, and study conduct, which is the way we actually perform the study on a day-to-day basis, also needs to be optimized. This slide is a graphical representation of a typical pain study in which there's a placebo arm marked in red and a treatment arm marked in black. You can see that the placebo response and the treatment response in this study are differentiated, and the distance between them creates a green area on the graph, which is the treatment effect. As the placebo response is exaggerated, it moves towards the black line, and the treatment effect is compressed. So ensuring that placebo response phenomenon are kept in check and are not exaggerated is important for the quality of our experiments. But the question is, how do you control it? Today we're going to discuss controlling these phenomenon through education, both through education of study subjects and also through education of study staff, investigators, and research coordinators. The first video I'm going to show here is part of our subject education package. We educate subjects both on their day of screening and on their day of randomized allocation to study drug, which in general is not on the same day. This video covers the topic, what is double-blind and what is placebo control. One could argue that those concepts are generally covered in the informed consent process, but I've been surprised to note that a deep understanding is generally not achieved during that process, and that additional education on this topic is really helpful.
Let's review two important terms: placebo control and double-blind. Placebo control means the study has one group of patients who receive placebo. Placebo is also known as a sugar pill, and it has no active ingredients. Double-blind means that not only are you unaware of whether or not you're receiving placebo, but the investigator and in fact the whole study team, including all the nurses and study coordinators who are caring for you, are also unaware of whether you are receiving placebo or active drug.
After showing subjects these videos, we sit them down and have them work on a post-test, which is really helpful because you can get a feeling for what the subject truly understands. And it's an opportunity for the study coordinator and the investigator to sit down and talk about key concepts. So I'll give you a chance to read this question in slide 9. The question is, the term double-blind means. You can take a look through the answers. And obviously the answer is C. What I'm going to do is move on to slide 10. The term randomized means your doctor decides which subject will receive placebo and who will receive active. You decide. All assessments in the study are random, or the correct answer, which is D, which subject receives active drug and which subject receives placebo, is randomly decided. And then finally, we ask this question in slide 11. The study you're in is randomized, double-blind, both, or neither, and obviously the answer is C. The point I want to make about these three questions is that they seem obvious to trained researchers, but they are not obvious to study subjects, and so going through them is important. Here in slide 12, I'm going to show a video in which we educate subjects and dive a little bit deeper into what exactly is the placebo effect.
It is a well-known phenomenon that in placebo-controlled clinical trials, subjects that receive placebos generally do show some improvement. In order for any clinical trial to be successful, the people who are assigned active medication have to get a better result than the people who are assigned placebo treatment. And therefore, it's in our benefit to minimize this placebo response as much as we can. It's odd when you think about it that patients who receive placebo would show some improvement. One would logically think a patient receiving a sugar pill would not get any better, but they do. It's not well understood why, but I have two theories. One theory is that patients are conditioned to believe the medications they take will prove to be effective based on their past experiences. This is known as the sugar pill effect. So when you take a medication, you think it's going to work, and somehow that makes you feel a little bit better. Another possibility is that the study subjects are just trying to be nice. They want to say something nice to please their doctor and the research staff and be supportive of the study team that's caring for them. So when their physician asks them, "How are you doing?" they tend to say, "I'm doing a little bit better," because they feel this will please their doctor or the study team. After all, the word placebo is Latin for "I will please." But remember, the study team doesn't know whether or not you are getting placebo, and you don't know whether or not you're getting placebo either. In that regard, you're off the hook. Just be as honest as possible about your responses. Don't feel pressured to give a positive response. Just take the time to give an accurate response. This is what's going to give us the best study result. There is no right or wrong answer.
Here I'm providing another test question. Let's go through this scenario. Bill had surgery yesterday, received 6 doses of drug over the last 24 hours. Study coordinator comes in to ask for a global assessment. Basically, Bill's had pain intensity of around 6 or 7 out of 10, which would occasionally drop to 5, but mostly stays around 6 or 7. The investigators and study coordinators have been really caring, really attentive. Bill likes them. He appreciates the professionalism and kindness of the researchers. And then the study coordinator asks Bill, overall, how would you rate this method of pain control during the past 24 hours, and what should Bill answer? Now, it may seem obvious to us that Bill should answer poor or fair based on the efficacy of the drug. But in my experience as an investigator, I've seen many patients tell me that, you know what, the drug didn't really work well for me, but I really liked you and I liked the team, and so I'm going to give it a good or excellent, which is obviously a problem. And therefore, making sure that patients understand what they're rating, that they're rating the drug, not the research team, is important. And to go a little further on the concept, we have this question as well. Bill's excited about the clinical trial. He wants the drug to work. And by indicating that, in fact, the drug did have either fair or poor efficacy, what has he done? Has he A, hurt the clinical trial because his impression of the drug was unfavorable, or has he helped the clinical trial achieve its goal because his response was accurate? It's important that subjects know that they can answer objectively, and that helps the clinical trial. In analgesic research studies, we as investigators are often put into a somewhat precarious position in which our long-term patients are serving as our study subjects. And our normal role as their treating physician is altered by the research relationship. This video attempts to explain and unentangle these two issues in the patient's mind.
When you are in a treatment relationship with your healthcare providers, the goal of both parties is to do whatever it takes to get you better. It's a partnership that is therapeutically aligned. In research, while the study team is there to care for you and keep you safe, the main goal is to conduct the study in the most objective way possible. For example, if you came to your doctor complaining of knee pain and you were not on a clinical trial, the doctor would put you on the medication that he felt would best treat your pain and continue to make whatever adjustments were necessary to get you as comfortable as possible. You might come back the next week and receive injections into your knee, followed by an increased dose of medication if you were not getting good relief. In a clinical trial, things are very different. Although the doctor is still very concerned for your safety, his primary goal when entering you into a clinical trial is to conduct the study in an objective fashion. After he puts you on the clinical trial, he will not know whether you are receiving the active medication or placebo. He will not be able to adjust the dose of your medication, and his main goal is to see how you fare in the clinical trial. Unless there is a safety concern, he will not make alterations in order to optimize your situation. Here, his role has been changed significantly, from that of an active healer to that of a passive observer. He's watching, like a referee, not tinkering and improving like a regular doctor would. It is important that you understand and accept this change in your doctor's role. The research relationship is an important responsibility not only for the doctor, but also for the study subject.
Okay, now I'm going to move on to discuss techniques to train investigators and research staff members. Patient bias and expectation of treatment effect drives placebo response, so ensuring that our interactions with our study subjects are neutral is really important.
Hi, Kevin.
Hey, Dr. Smith. My back is really getting bad again. I need to try something else for my pain.
Well, you've actually come in at a good time because we're conducting a new study that you might be able to participate in. It's on a drug that I'm excited about, and it works in a unique way, so therefore it's different than anything we've given to you before. The results of earlier phase studies on the same drug look promising, and that's positive. So if you decide to participate, it's strictly voluntary, but since I know about your back pain and the treatments that you've received before, it leads me to believe that you'd make a great candidate for this study.
Obviously, there was positive bias when the ICF was being delivered. And it's funny that when I do this webinar or I do educational seminars for pharmaceutical companies, a lot of people think this video is over the top in the way that the physician is selling the study to the patient. But when I show the video to investigators, I get a lot of feedback, which is, well, if I can't tell my subject that this is a promising new therapy, then how can I incentivize them to participate in the clinical trial? And my response to this is that the best way to enroll and incentivize subjects to participate in clinical trials is to rely on their altruistic motivations. Now, that can be seen as a pie-in-the-sky type answer, and of course, every investigator will have to craft their own discussion with the study subject. But in order to reduce placebo response, and in order to be honest about what we're really doing in clinical trials, I believe this is the best solution. In this video, we demonstrate a more neutral and less biased introduction of the clinical trial to the study subject.
Hi, Kevin. Thanks for coming in today.
Hey, Dr. Smith. My back is really getting bad again. I need to try something else for my pain.
Okay, well, we're doing a randomized double-blind clinical trial where we'll be comparing a new drug against a placebo. I wanted to sit down with you and go over the logistics to see if you'd be interested in participating. Now, you know from personal experience that low back pain is a common problem for a lot of people. And the key for us to make things better is to do research on some new drugs. Your participation in the study is completely voluntary, and your incentive will be to help us to not only understand how the disease works, but to also research which drugs will help treat it and which ones won't.
Okay, and our investigator education series continues by taking a study subject through a predictable sequence of study visits and identifying key questions that we as investigators are typically asked during those visits, and then providing advice on how those questions should be answered. And to give a feel for what those topics are, the first bullet point, what do you think about the study drug? So subjects ask us all the time, well, what's your opinion about this study drug? Do you think it's good? And this can be a very uncomfortable situation, and it can tend to make you want to lead the patient, because typically if you're doing research on a drug, you do believe in it and you do believe it's a good drug. But telling the patient, yeah, this is a really great drug, is maybe not the best idea when it comes to placebo response phenomenon. And the second bullet point, if I get placebo, will I have more pain? When a study subject asks you this question, it can be extremely uncomfortable. But the truth and the reality is that in placebo-controlled analgesic investigations, in most of them, the primary endpoint compares the analgesic efficacy of the study drug against placebo. So the mathematical correct answer is yes, if you're in this study and you're in the placebo arm and the study is to succeed, you will have more pain than patients in the active arm. But that discussion, as I said, is uncomfortable, and we work through it as best we can in our video series. The third bullet, we get a lot of questions about rescue, and we walk through that. The fourth bullet, how are the patients in the study doing so far? This is a great opportunity to remind the subject from an efficacy standpoint that you really don't know, because it's a double-blind investigation, rather than saying, yeah, the patients are doing great. Now, safety information, yes, you have to talk about safety information, whatever you know, but efficacy information you really don't know because you are blinded, and it's a good opportunity, again, to remind the subject of that. The last bullet point has to do with dropouts, which is really not the topic of this webinar, but is an important issue in analgesic clinical trials. When performing a methodological intervention, it's always important to measure whether that intervention is actually helping. And we have had an opportunity to measure the success of our training interventions in multi-center clinical trials. The gold standard for measurement would be to perform a randomized, double-blind clinical trial in which some patients are trained and other patients aren't trained. But this is prohibitively expensive, although we're trying to do this. At the moment, the evidence we have is centered around when we perform a multi-center clinical investigation, and some centers use the training package and other centers don't. What we do is we take out the standardized effect size from those centers and compare it to the standardized effect sizes at the centers that didn't use the training. And consistently we've observed higher standardized effect sizes among trained centers as compared to centers that have not gone through the training package and have not administered the training materials to their study subjects. So in conclusion, patient expectation drives placebo response. Positive bias in clinical trials needs to be avoided, and it's very difficult to avoid. And a clear understanding of the experimental process by the study subject and by the investigative staff is really important. Thanks very much for taking the time to listen to this webinar. We have more webinars coming up, and if you have any questions or comments, feel free to contact me. Thanks.